This is the Authentic Dating series brought to you by Ahmad and David,
where we explore what it takes to have a dating life you're excited about.
Hey guys, I'm David.
I'm Ahmad.
And this is the Authentic Dating series. So we've got a really special episode again. You know, all our episodes are special, basically, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We've got a great episode with a guy who we've got to know over the last year, Eddy Elsey, who is a shamanic practitioner. For most of us, he's a shaman, and he's an incredibly interesting guy. I've been to a number of his workshops, and they're incredible. Some really great work that he does in terms of helping people looking to their story, heal from past trauma through his shamanic practices. I always call him London's finest shaman. I don't know if there's many others in London.
I love his website. Was it Street Spirituality? .com. Yeah, beautiful name. Yeah, no, I love Eddy. He really is down to earth, and I feel the work he's doing is so cool because it takes something that I think for many years, for a lot of us in the cities and urban life, have felt very disconnected or distant from, which is like spirituality and all of these woo-woo type things. And he's really brought it into the cities, into the urban life, and made these healings and what do you call them, like shamanic ceremonies, and like you said, I've been to a couple of them alongside with David, and they're always beautiful spaces, and you always learn a lot and build great connections with everyone who's there. He definitely has this very calming energy to him, and his ability. You just feel very safe in his presence. I love his vibe. So yeah, very excited for this episode. And as David said, I think recently all of our episodes and all our guests has been very special. We've been having an amazing time with the guests on this episode. So yeah, do have a look at our other podcasts if you haven't seen them, because we're really bringing you some awesome guests and perspectives on this season 2.
And this episode is an interesting one because we kind of had a rough idea what we're going to talk about, but it really just kind of weaved and flowed through many things. Like we started off talking about conspiracy theories and kind of Corona and the whole space of that and how that's affecting us all, and also, you know, some of the poor positive aspects to it as well. Actually, we talk about in there, and then we kind of delve into the shadow work that Eddy does with people, and also the shadow in itself. And for those of you who don't understand what that is, it's kind of the place where we put the things we don't like about ourselves, our past shame, our trauma, the things we want to hide. And really shadow work is around uncovering that and accepting and making peace and you know, loving those parts of yourself. Like it's really important, because if there's anything, when I say, you know, the things you try and hide from people, something comes to your mind. You know, there's something you've done, you know, it's that sort of thing. And we explain how that sort of occurrence is still affecting your life day to day, and it's impacting your relationships and so forth. And then we get on to talk about men's work. We talk about rites of passage. So I know Eddy runs sweat lodges when the world isn't locked in. So that's something we go into some detail about there. And we also talk about personal story, which is something we go into quite a lot of detail about, and something that I know Ahmad is very passionate about. And we also really get into personal responsibility. And how personal responsibility is actually the key to the power, having power in your life and creating what you want, whether that be relationships, that be business, that be money, that be love, whatever it is actually the key to you living the life that you really want.
Yeah. As we go into, and you'll hear more about this, how actually being responsible and taking responsibility gives you freedom in life and gives you power and freedom in life. And it's not something that I feel that we're necessarily taught at school per se, or even, you know, some people don't necessarily know how to word it that way, but it's been so true for my personal journey. I know in David's journey as well, in our self-awareness and in our growth. And I think the best place that you really see this come up, and this is why we love this topic so much, is in your relationships. And how it allows you to create the kind of relationships that you really want, you know. So without further ado,
we'll jump into the episode. So hey guys and girls, we've got a really special guest with us today. Eddy Elsey is a shamanic practitioner. We've known Eddy for a while. We've been all talking about all things shamanic, but also a lot of other work that he does when it comes to healing, and also various workshops that he runs around masculinity, around shadow work as well. But I'll let him talk a little bit more into that. Eddy.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're good, man. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you joining us. Like David said, like we've really loved and enjoyed your work, and obviously we've attended your workshops and stuff. And we think what you're doing for men in today's age, really helping men do that deep work that's really necessary. Well, actually, all people now, right? You started off focusing on men, but you've expanded. But yeah, we're good. How are you doing?
Good. I'm well. We were talking off air about the boredom that has begun to trickle in. But apart from that, I can't really complain. I've been very blessed in terms of the virus. No one I know has had it. Talking like immediate family. So I haven't been affected by it in that much of a negative way. It's kind of been stay indoors and wait it out. So in that sense, I feel very lucky. I've managed to move quite a lot of my work online, and that's been different, but still very fun and still interesting. And the shadow workshop's gone online as well, and kind of my one-to-one stuff. So it's altered how we do it, and it's less of a ceremony. It's more of a kind of classroom vibe chat thing, but it's still good. It's still fun. So I can't complain. Complain. What about you guys?
That's good. Oh, I feel like this kind of period has been a real kind of like journey. Like I've kind of started off for me. I got sick with what I suspect was a virus quite early on, and kind of came out of that feeling very tired and like having a really low energy for everything. Like we made podcasts all the way through, but I just feel like a general kind of contraction of energy, and from everyone, but even myself, of like, you feel the fear and the worry that's around you, that's always from the people you speak to. And I think it's only now I'm starting to go back more to my old way of being like, what can I do to produce? How can I, be of service to people, and giving energy to people in the best way that I can. But again, like yourself, I've been lucky. Like none of my friends and family have like I know a couple of people have been ill, but everyone's recovered without any issue. The main person I've been concerned about is my mum. She's a bit older and she's had like health issues before, but she's fine. She's isolating very well and very happily. Nice. And my dad's in Jamaica and he's been stranded there for 2 months because he can't get back.
Oh, what a terrible place to be stranded.
I know. He sounds, when I spoke to him recently, I was like, how are you? He's like, yeah, I'm all right. I was like, what's going on? He's like, I can't get back. He's like, but he goes, I'd rather be here than stranded in my flat in London. I was like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Like my experience has also been quite interesting because I manage a care home for people with learning disabilities, and so right from the beginning, there was a call upon me to expand in what I was doing and to shift and adapt to the changing situation. So in that way, like Corona's been very eye-opening to see how policy changes and what becomes important when there's a serious issue in the community, and how to deal with that ongoingly, because obviously, as we both mentioned and stuff, different people have been affected in different ways, and I've actually been very lucky that similar to both of you, no one in my personal family has been affected, and even care home, like whatever we seem to be doing is working, no one's been affected. So yeah, it's been, in a way, kind of what you just said there, Dave, about kind of going back. I don't know if there really is the space of going back, but rather that we've expanded into what is here for us now. And I'm actually excited because it feels like progress. It doesn't feel like I've lost something. It feels like I've actually grown. As scary as it can be at times, or worrying it can be, because I've had to be out in the community. I go to the shops and do stuff, and you hear all the different bits of information, and you have to be able to operate inside of that and continue, the best you can to live and to do what you need to do. So So yeah, it's been really, really, it's been really interesting. It's obviously not something I would have wished. It's not that, it's not what I would have wished for the world. Like, people are suffering as well in different ways, health, and the economics of things and stuff, and everyone's got a different experience at the moment. But I think there is definitely opportunity during this time to learn something about ourselves and to grow as well. So these things to mourn and to let go of.
Yeah, I think grateful is a good word. I feel very grateful too, just for the small things. And I think when this lockdown does end or get relaxed and things start to move again, it's going to be amazing. And I am excited as well. Like you touched upon, there's a lot of fear going around, and there's a lot of different theories, and I'm sure there are some truths in them somewhere. And it's easy to get kind of bogged down, and this is kind of the end of the world and the end of things, and it's only going to get worse, and this virus is just the beginning. But I got to be honest, I don't see it like that. I feel like it's potentially the catalyst or the trickster that our society needed to kind of crack things open a little bit, and to make us look around and think, okay, you know what, it could be much worse.
No, I feel like it's given people like a lot of time to be with themselves and their own feelings without that as much external influence. Like, it's something that I've seen in myself recently, is like what emotions are coming up for me actually around being at home, being away from people that I really enjoy spending time with. And like even just being with my partner, like we've just been here together basically straight for 2 months, and we don't normally live together. So it's like a whole new experience, and just kind of observing the whole process of like, oh, I'm annoyed about something. What am I actually annoyed about? Is it something that she's done, or is it because of some meaning that I've given something that's happened, And it's quite a great, I think in a way, it's almost, you can almost take it like a meditation. Like a 2-month meditation is like of observing how you're feeling, spend a little time analyzing what it is that you're feeling and why that's coming up, and looking a bit deeper into those. There's been a lot of reflection time.
It's definitely been interesting with a partner. I got engaged 3 days before the lockdown.
Oh shit! Congratulations!
Wow, congrats!
Thank you.
That's all.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. So it's been this kind of a weird honeymoony period, which has been nice. It's like if I could have wished for something, it would be like, all right, well, let's get engaged, and then we don't have to go to work for 8 weeks. We can just relax. So again, it's like, I feel very lucky. If I don't tune into all the noise around the virus and this and that and the kind of doom and gloom, but when I go for a walk, or I look outside, or I talk to my friends, or I do sessions with people or workshops, it's like everything's great. So I guess it's what you want to tap into in terms of that, but the noise is there. My housemates and
people was wandering around. No, but there is this like a lot of and it really saps your energy as well when you start to really tune into that noise, into like the people, that the guessing of what's really going on. It takes your attention and focus away from really what you want to be focused on and what you want your attention on. It's like I've seen how you can sit and watch conspiracy theories for 4 hours in your day, or you could like actually put your mind to something that you truly love, that really matters to you. Like, I think it's something that I've always seen as what happens in the world is there's always, we each individually have things that we really want. It's like, maybe, for us, it's like it's helping men is something that's really we're passionate about. And it's easy for us to go, oh, I can spend 4 hours, writing or speaking to men or coaching or I could spend 4 hours reading the news, being distracted by conspiracy theories. And I think this is like the game that's going on in the world constantly. Is like there's always these distractions of fear and worry that take you away from what you're really about. You know, what your heart really sings for, really wants to go towards.
Yeah, I agree. It's been interesting with it's a lot of the one-to-one stuff I do is around helping people change their story, the narrative that they've set themselves, and that's the way that they orientate their way through life, through their kind of the vision of their own belief systems. And lots of them are cultural in the way that they grew up, and some are personal, and they kind of all mishmash together. But the theme through the healings in this period and also before that, it's mostly about control and lack of control, and the control and power dynamics people have, and whether they feel like it's either being taken away from them and that's something that's disempowering them, or they feel that they are controlling others, and then disempowering others, and I guess by that disempowering themselves. And also then looking at these theories that have come out that are all about, Bill Gates wants to control the world, the Illuminati wants to control the 5G, they're trying to control, it's all around control. And I don't personally believe necessarily that the conspiracy theories are true, but I do believe that there is truth in the conspiracies. They're like myths, they're like vehicles of truth, and they carry something that speaks to people. I don't think necessarily the characters are legitimate for them, but I do think as a society, those control dynamics are really coming out. It's like the tug of war between the government. It's like the government's like, we've got to lock down, you've got to wear masks, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And they're trying to help us, and we're like, okay, well, I don't want to do that. Stop telling me what to do. I'll do what I want. I'll make my own decisions. And so it's this kind of tug of war. And it's been interesting to see that on like a personal level in one-to-one, and then this whole kind of culture game that's going on at the moment, and now a global thing that's happening, and the countries that seem to have done really well over or in the period, places like China are very authoritarian, and they have control over their citizens, and the citizens give control, kind of willingly or unwillingly. And in the more kind of liberal countries, it's not going so well. So what does that say about control? And it's just this, bit of a head fuck. Can I swear?
Yes.
Okay.
Literally.
So that's been something I've been thinking about and trying to work out. Maybe some form of control isn't the worst thing, but then who decides who's being controlled? And looking at myself in my relationship with my fiance, like there's elements in the relationship where both of us have control over certain things, but we willingly give that up, and that's how our dynamic is, and it works for us. So it's interesting, and lots of the shadow workshops have been centered around this idea of control. And also you touched about the men's work, and men kind of is very typical of a man to push things to the side and to suppress things, and looking at that form of control, they're trying to control their own inner workings.
Yeah, I think it's what stands out for me, which is I feel very, again, grateful that I have some level of awareness of my particular shadow and the way in which I like to feel safe and to feel like I'm viable in the world, and then seeing how everything that we're currently going through and the different stories. Because I was wondering how many hours of conspiracy videos I have watched. I've said to some people, like, I think I've got to the end of the rabbit hole. Like, people say you're going down an endless rabbit hole. I was like, no, I think I got to the end of it. There is an end. But it goes back to, there's a post that you made on your Instagram, Eddie, about very early on. It was very early on in the whole Corona drama, and it was about David Icke and what do people think about it. And I just typed something back in a response, and it just made me realize, because whenever I would watch someone like David Icke, or there's a lot of conspiracy theorists, is I would then remark on how I was left feeling. So it's like, okay, you got the mainstream narrative, which is, okay, there's a virus and we don't know what's happening, and the best thing we can do right now is to initially lock down and flatten the curve and reduce the stress on the NHS, at least in the UK, and medical services. And then on the, like, one of the alternative narratives is, okay, this is a ploy to get us all into a modicum of control, and if we just follow suit and we comply, then we're going to be fucked because they're going to change policy. And, you know, when we come out of this, so much will have changed and we won't even have realized, because of the fact that we've been blindsided by this virus or this crisis. And depending on who you listen to, as David said earlier, it's like you end up in the space of fear. It's like, well, it's either there's a virus that's going to get me and nature's out to get me, and like, you know, I can't leave my house right now because that's a genuine threat that I feel is out there as a reality. The Invisible Man. Interestingly enough, just as Corona was coming in, the Invisible Man was to hit the cinemas. And so for a good couple of weeks, because I go to the care home and stuff, I'm driving around, and I'm still seeing these buses with the Invisible Man and their slogan on the buses going around East London. And the slogan is, "What you can't see can hurt you." And I thought that was quite interesting as a thing just to be going around in society. People can just see. So the thing that I'm left with after having looked at both sides of the story, at least the prevailing narratives that are there, like whether it's conspiracy theory or whether it's the like government saying, okay, this is what's happening, this is what we need to do, is like, where is the power? Like, where is my power, more specifically? Like, where is my energy going? Like, what am I creating? So we have a premise of, like, you know, you create what you focus on, and that means, you know, whatever you put your energy into, then that's what you're going to create. So the idea that, for example, a lot of people talk about the law of attraction, and they'll say, well, you know, if I envisage that I'm going to have £1 million or a Ferrari, then I'm going to create that. But then it doesn't occur, because what's actually going on is, well, actually, I feel like I'm poor and miserly, and so I need to have these things in my life in order so that I can feel full and whole and complete and validated by others and seem to be powerful by others, because in truth I feel powerless and I don't have it. So the real focus is not on the Ferrari or the making the money. It's actually on the fact that I'm trying to get away from my current situation of feeling really fucking little and insignificant, powerless. And so when you use that as a sort of GPS for navigating what we're going through right now, as David was saying earlier, the tug of war. You were saying already, like the tug of war between essentially our attention, from what I would, in simple terms, put my attention on what I would love to see happen, versus what I'm very scared of happening and what I'm really, really fearful of. And so that's been an interesting. That's what's like come in 150%. You know, coming into this experience with the care home and everything going on. It's like, I've always been trying to build myself out of it and have the care home run itself. And with this, Corona comes in, everything else I'm doing gets like massively limited, and the care home becomes the biggest thing for me to focus on again. But being able to step into, like, where's my power, I realized that what a great time to actually clean things up, reorganize, and make things more efficient, and better understand like how to run a care home well during a time like this. So that's where I'm left with this whole, like, it's the energy of the situation. Like, where am I putting my energy? Is it that I've read something about conspiracy theories and now I think that someone outside of me, like Bill Gates, has the power to change my reality? Or is it that I feel completely powerless, that there's an invisible virus and I need the government to step in and do something fucking soon, because I'm losing my fucking mind here, because I can't go out and I can't do what I want to be doing. I was supposed to have gone on holiday by now and come back and that shit. And this is like, and I'm supposed to be getting married this year as well. Like, what a great fucking year to get engaged and married and shit, bro. It was like, I know.
Congratulations to you as well.
Yeah, thanks. And getting engaged. I don't know if your experience. I can only presume your experience was similar to mine, right? It's like you make the decision. I'm actually going to do this, and then you either go and get a ring or you don't get a ring. But then you lead yourself towards that moment, that point in time where you're actually going to speak the words, and then wait.
Terrifying.
Yeah. It's beautiful though, right? It's like you think you're a man, and then you go to propose.
Oh, mate, I thought I was so cool. I completely fell apart. Maybe we can have a joint wedding on Zoom or something.
I think it's getting to that, bro. Yeah, we'll split the cost. We'll split the Zoom the Zoom cost.
Zoom webinar.
Yeah. Can split the professional account.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. There's a few things in what you said, which resonate with me. I mean, look, David Icke's been around for fucking ages.
Yeah.
Like talking 20, 30 years. No one's really taken notice of him. He has a cult following, but I would put money on lots of the people at the moment who are like, wow, he's kind of the savior in this situation. If you spoke to them 5 years ago about David Icke, they'd be like, that guy is talking absolute nonsense. So there's this thing where the cultural narrative at the moment and him have collided at this point where it makes sense, but it doesn't really make sense. I mean, and I have this in lots of one-to-one things. At the beginning of my sessions, there's like an hour-long chat, and I basically it's just asking questions really, and the aim of it is to find people's patterns and then track those patterns back to potentially, if not the moment, but at least the original belief system, which was kind of the original head of the Hydra, which then spouts lots of different heads, and as we grow up becomes more and more elaborate until we find ourselves in our own little fairy tale. And it usually gets to the point where we get to something which resonates, and then 9 times out of 10 the person is like, it can't be that simple. And it's almost as if the fact that there's a virus that has come along, and it's quite a nasty one, and it's affecting the globe, it's like that's too simple. And the idea, also in alternative and spiritual communities, that the earth is kind of, not 100% good and positive and full of love, and can actually spring something up which can actually do us a lot of harm. Also, I think maybe sits quite uncomfortable with some people. So it's like, well, okay, it can't just be a virus. There has to be another thing. So when someone like David Icke, who's an incredible orator and he knows his shit, he knows. And, you ask him any question, he'll talk for days on it. And it's like, okay, well, this guy seems very confident in the situation. And, lots of the stuff he says, I think it's logical. It's like, okay, well, the virus is spread from hand to hand. So he's like, well, there's no cash anymore. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, if I can give you the virus by giving you money that exchanges hands 100 times, like that's a logical thing. It doesn't necessarily mean the Illuminati want to kill everyone. So the narrative fits, but that doesn't, I don't think, mean that it's, a lot of the stuff is true. And I think it's causing a lot of fear because the virus is here. So people are scared of that. But then on top of that, it's like, well, there's also a group of elite people who essentially want to control and kill everyone. And the Bill Gates stuff is interesting. I went fully down the rabbit hole, and I love a conspiracy theory. I really do. And like, I am the first one in our friendship group, on like our group WhatsApp, to be like, well, have you heard of the other side of things? And, but, lots of the stuff like the polio thing, when, this stuff where he was kicked out of India, and it's like, well, there's 2 parts to that study. One of them which says that it did people harm, and then another part which says actually it wasn't necessarily related to the vaccine. So nothing's as black and white as things are being made out to be. But I think what makes people feel safe is having real characters to pin the shadow on. So someone like Bill Gates becomes almost this devil figure. And then, you know, the World Health Organization becomes this group of people that are kind of mobilizing in the darkness. And it doesn't, you don't need to have that projection. And unfortunately, I think it's going to do us a lot of harm as a society, because it turns into a witch hunt. And then let's say Bill Gates gets put in prison. Let's say, you know, that shadow doesn't disappear when he gets put away, or something happens to Bill Gates. It doesn't disappear. There is evil in the world, you know, and I think that is a reality, and you don't need to dance with it. And it's almost like it's quite hard to articulate, but the situation of control and the fear that people fear isn't going to disappear with the World Health Organization or Bill Gates or any of this. It's just moving the spotlight of it so people can see it and project it onto someone. And it's like when someone in the street triggers you, you know, that's kind of a small form of it. And you're like, right, I've got to stay away from that person. And it's like all the negative aspects of yourself you dump on that person so you don't have to deal with them. So in a way, I feel a bit sorry for Bill Gates. I mean, I don't like him. I mean, I don't know him, obviously. But I don't really have an opinion of him. So it's difficult. I've tried to in this situation. I mean, the first 10 days I was fully in the rabbit hole, you know, and it was so exciting.
I think I saw you there, mate.
Yeah. It was so exciting, and I was like, oh my god, it's this and this and this, and the fucking reptilians and all of this shit, and and then I was just like, wow, actually, it's all in me. All of this stuff is in me, and freedom exists in me, or control exists in me. So it's my choice, completely my choice.
It's interesting what you say actually about like it's in you. And I had a question here actually to take it to about some of the shadow work you were speaking about earlier. And for our listeners who, you know, this kind of question's for some of our listeners who maybe aren't so well acquainted with what that means. Like, would you be able to explain what kind of shadow work is?
Yeah, the way I see it, and it's different to, I mean, there's so many people with their own kind of versions of it, and there's lots of stuff in psychoanalysis around the shadow, and then also in shamanism, there's kind of their own version as well. And the way I see it is there's two different types of shadows. First of all, there's the personal shadow and the collective shadow, which Carl Jung speaks about a lot as well. And I think really the only thing we can have an effect on is our own personal shadow. And we don't need to dabble in the collective shadow. And when I spoke earlier about the fact that there's evil in the world and people committing, you know, evil deeds, I'm sure that's always happened and always will happen. But what we have control over is ourselves. And everything that's been shamed or guilted or scared out of us, we put in the shadow. And that can happen through a direct experience, whether we do something that we feel guilty for or feel shame for, or commit an act where, and it usually happens when we're very young, but not all the time, where we feel, okay, I can't do this. So we kind of put it away. Robert Bly, he's an amazing author and did a lot of men's work as well. He talks about it as like you're carrying a bag behind your back, and anytime something gets shamed, you take it and you just put it in the bag. And also we get shamed a lot by our culture. We get shamed a lot by our parents as kind of extensions of that culture too. So by the time we're teenagers and adults, we're carrying around a really heavy bag full of stuff that we feel isn't right. And we're left with quite a rigid sense of self. And when experiences happen or we meet people that don't agree with the rigid sense of self that we orientate ourselves through life with, it causes friction. And we either see that as a bad thing that we need to stay away from, or we seek to destroy it in different ways, either by control or discrimination, or you pick. But shadow work, I think, is gently taking things out of the bag, having a look at them and giving them a seat at the table. And it doesn't mean you need to become them. It doesn't mean you take sexuality out of the bag and become a ravenous sex addict. If you want, you can do whatever you want, but it doesn't mean you have to do it to not discriminate against it. It can just be something that you don't have a reaction to. And it's like, okay, well, that's a part of me. It doesn't need to come out every day, but I know it. Because what happens is when we don't know something, it's like taking an animal and putting it in a cage and it's constantly aggressive. And it's like taking that animal for face value about the aggression. It's like, well, no, it's aggressive because it's constantly suppressed. Whereas in its natural habitat, 90% of the time, it's just lying in the sun. So, and once you allow it in its natural habitat and you can observe it, and it's like, wow, okay, that's nothing to be afraid of. And then you can have a relationship with it. And then it doesn't tend to run your life, because when things go in, if we're using the analogy of the bag, they just explode out of nowhere. Aggression is quite a big thing for men, and it's big with when I grew up, it was like this kudos around, pub on a Friday night and you get in a ruck with someone, or it would happen, or you'd be like, da, 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 and it was like, I spent the majority of my Friday nights terrified. I had no relationship with aggression. And because of that, I was scared of it when it came out. And I see that a lot with men who come to the men's groups, and sexuality and aggression seem to be the main ones, really, where people don't form relationships with them, so they drive their actions from the darkness.
Yeah, that's actually a huge part of when we coach our clients. It's getting people into touch with how they really feel about themselves, and often they haven't actually taken the time to look into that, see what's actually there, that's running the show in terms of what they feel they're able to do in their lives in terms of relationships and meeting people, how they communicate, what they communicate about themselves and what they believe about themselves as well. And we find like that, I mean, for me, well, I say we find, I mean, I know from my personal experience and David's too, like in my own relationships, this kind of work has just completely transformed the way that I relate to others, by actually getting in touch with what's really there for me. And I love what you said about just because it's in the bag doesn't mean you got to take it out and then become that thing. It's actually, sometimes it's just to have the courage to look at it, and I feel a lot of times people are afraid that there's something in there that if it comes out, they won't be able to put the lid on or something, or that it's going to take over and it's going to be a freaking meltdown. But actually, it's just to be able to look at it and then be cool with it, like be okay with it, accept it. So yeah, I personally really resonate with that, because I've seen in my own journey, like that's been huge in my own transformation, with my character and in my relationship, just being, because it's not like I'm completely rid of my shadows. Like stuff comes up and I'm better at observing and seeing, like, okay, there's something taking over here. There's something that I'm acting from a space that I'm not completely content, or I'm looking for something, or I feel a void. So yeah, I think that's really beautiful, the way you described it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from a sense of loss, and when something's shamed out of us or guilted out of us, there's a mourning that we have to put it away. And then it transforms into something that is different to what it originally was. And often when people start doing this stuff, they're quite shocked and also relieved at what they end up looking at isn't this terrifying beast. It's just, usually just a really childlike version of themselves that's sad, and it's like, why did you put me away? So it's actually more like if you're a man, like a fatherly relationship, and a woman motherly, and it takes a lot of nurture, which is a wonderful experience. And also when you can nurture those aspects of yourself, suddenly it really does transform your relationships, because all of the sides in your partner that don't agree with your own sense of morality or don't agree with your own belief, you learn to nurture them as well. And that really does transform your relationship, because suddenly it's like, wow, I'm a lot closer to unconditional love because I love the parts of you that I don't understand, which is a big gift to give someone. If you can do them.
It's real compassion, isn't it? It's like what I'm really hearing what you said is often there's things about ourselves that we, like you said, they're shamed, we dislike. It could be, it could be something to do with how we look, but equally it's like, you talk about sexuality, which I think is a very common one, as you said, around for men, but it doesn't always, when they move through the world, it doesn't appear that there's something around sexuality they have an issue with. It might be in terms of how they relate, whether that be relationships and dating, but actually it's that there's some sort of suppression for them sexually, and sometimes it does come out as like wanting to be, not like a sex god, but wanting to be that kind of masculine sexual being, that we're kind of conditioned into, but negating all the kind of intimacy and emotional side of sex. And it's often once they start to explore that part of their sexuality, that they start to see that there's, like you said, there's a loss. And what the loss is often is actually some kind of love and care, is what they're really longing for in their relationships, is like that loving tenderness. But they felt that for some reason that's shameful to have that, or they can't have that, and they move through this way. But it's so, I really love what you were saying about the bag, because it's so true, isn't it? We just throw things in the bag. Oh, I'm never going to look at that, I'm never going to speak about that, I'm just going to throw it in the bag. And I think when you give words to these experiences, these emotions, these feelings, when you take them out, it's like they're never what you think they were. No. They're never like some evil, you were that person. If someone does something to you and it causes you to feel a certain way, and you throw that in the bag, often you look at what happened and you're like, oh, actually, was that the real story of what happened? Like I have an example of when I was young, my dad, the story I hold actually is that I was at school, and I was at private school for a little bit, and he had said to one of the headmaster that I wasn't worth the money and I should be taken out. And I once spoke to him about this, like in tears one day, and he was just like, I don't remember saying that. I wouldn't have said that. That's not what how I felt. But the story that I had about it was like this real evil, cruel, mean, thing to it. And actually, when I spoke to him and we uncovered it, it was like, wow, that's not really what actually happened. It's just complete story that I held around that event.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's like, well, I found it, I spent so long going through life looking at situations and looking at people's actions, and my compass would be, would I do that? And if it was yes, I'd be like, okay, we can be friends. And if it was no, I actually probably wouldn't do that, it was like, okay, well, we can't have any form of relationship. And obviously with a relationship, if you're in it with someone, you get to know each other so intricately that they're going to do things where you're like, I don't think I'd have acted that way. And then usually that's a point of friction, and it's like, it becomes like, I can't believe you did that.
Mm.
Whereas, like you're saying with your father, when he was saying, I don't remember that, I wouldn't have done that, or if I did, I would have had a different meaning to the one that you remember in the story. Like you said, it's having compassion for people acting in a different way than you'd act, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and then you actually, depending on how you want to take it, you can take on their viewpoint as well and expand yours by using theirs. I think with men and sexuality, also, just to go back to that, it's a lot of the suppression comes with suppressing women.
Yes.
In sexuality. So, lots of men may not feel sexually repressed, but if you're repressing women for being sexual, being as sexual as you, or even being more sexual than you, then you are by default repressing yourself and the idea of sexuality. And it's that's an interesting one to unpick, and it's again, that's a cultural thing as well. It seems to be quite a Western thing, that sexual women are deemed as something that's not, that old myth of like, well, I wouldn't marry one.
It's like they're dangerous.
Well, I was growing up, I was taught to believe that they were. So it's, my fear. And I remember being in a ceremony once, and it was really getting to me because I kept falling for really sexual girls. Surprise, surprise. And I was like, wow, okay, well, it terrifies me. And the way I was taught to grow up and the belief systems I had is that there's something wrong with it. From no experience of my own. I remember being in ceremony and so getting to this state where I was kind of asking spirit, and I was like, to show me like a different way, show me a different answer. And the answer I got was like, well, think about it logically. You're in a partnership with someone and they're really sexual, and that's also where they cultivate their creation, their creativity, their own personal power, their own freedom. So using that as a kind of roadmap, it's like, okay, well, the more sexual someone is, the more personal power they have and the more vibrancy they have. And if you're in a partnership with someone, would you not want them to be as vibrant and creative and free as possible? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, okay, well, there's your answer. And I was like, ding. Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. So
and then often it's gone. No, sorry,
I was going to say. So then, any time I felt to suppress that, it was like, oh, okay, I'm suppressing myself by suppressing this, because I'm reducing what this partnership could become, because I'm making you smaller, and that's making, I must be pretty small if I'm seeking to make you small.
It's back to that idea of control.
Back to control, back to control. I have to control you so I feel safe.
It's the kind of adage that I think often, especially the kind of suppression of women's sexuality is like, it's because it's not so much because men are cruel, it's because they're afraid of their own sexuality, the power of the sexual energy, and because there's no understanding. It's like, well, I don't understand it, so I just want to suppress it and stop it from, being there, because it can be so creative and energizing. And it is a really, it's a really beautiful thing to see a woman who is like extremely sexually expressed, and we see this in our coaching, is like a lot of men are deeply scared of that because of what it means about them and their own sexual nature and their own expression, and feeling lesser than, or feeling that they don't have that sort of energy.
There's something in that. I mean, for me, it's like I tend to be attracted to what people represent that I've put in the bag. and that's eventually a very beautiful thing, but it's quite a scary thing to navigate, because it's like, well, I don't understand this at all, so you're going to need to show me the way. But that takes a lot of vulnerability, because you're basically admitting that you got a lot more power than me. Which again, as men, you're not taught to ever say. And if you don't feel like you're powerful, you better fucking act like you are. Which is a whole nother kind of mind fuck. It's quite difficult to be a man. There's a lot of kind of stories around it's easy to be a man, but I disagree. I have to say, I think there's a lot to navigate, and it can feel very lonely sometimes. And that was one of the reasons I started the men's groups, because I was looking around and seeing so many women having communities and going to goddess circles or women circles or this or that, really taking their power back and being incredibly brave to do so. I looked at men and it was like, no, we can't admit any of this. Maybe more so because the women are taking their power back. We really need to act like we've got it. So that was a really amazing thing about a lot of the men's groups, to like just chat to men and being like, this fucking terrifies me.
And did you find in the men's groups that, like, it was for men, it was like a weight off their shoulders to come and talk about how they're really feeling?
Yeah. So there was a journey with the men's groups where they started as sharing circles, really, where people would just come and talk. And then it became quite apparent after about 6 or 7 months to a year, where lots of men, and myself included, we'd come with an issue and talk about it and work through the issue, and then we'd come back in 3 months with another issue, which would actually be around the same thing, really. So it was like the issue, just the spotlight of it had just moved to another area of our life, and it's like we kind of conquered one thing, and then it was like, okay, well, it's here, and then we conquer that, and then it will go somewhere else, and it was like, wow, in a way, we're not really getting anywhere, because whatever it is that's kind of getting to us, it's still there, and it's just showing up in different areas of our life. So then we moved it into kind of more ceremonial rites of passage based things, and I feel like that was better for addressing kind of core wounds and more healing, really. But then it became quite apparent that and I looked into a lot of traditional and indigenous rites of passages and initiations, and a really key component to that was the entire community. So the men would go off and do their initiations with just men, but then they'd come back to a community where, in many tribes, they'd have different names, they'd wear different clothes, they've had different titles, they'd have secret, tribal knowledge where, I don't know why I did that. They would have secret tribal knowledge, which was like, right. So all of these things marked their psyche with, it's like, I became a man in that week.
Yeah.
I went through something usually to do with quite a lot of physical pain and endurance, and I came back, and my life in every aspect is completely different. Whereas we were going away on a weekend, having great and important experiences, but then you'd be back Monday morning in the office, everyone's the same, no one else's life has changed, you're still that guy, everyone treats you the same, and it's incredibly difficult to cement that in your psyche. So still, people after 6 months were coming back and saying, I actually feel a bit worse because I know what I could feel like, but I feel like I've failed. So I think for men, in terms of a rites of passage and initiation, it's going to be a community effort, and we need to really change so much about society, and it could realistically be 6, 7, 8 generations before we start to really make a difference with it. And also in the tribes and the indigenous culture, which aren't perfect by any means, but they're good at working with the mind, much better than we are. They'd have an entire cosmology and gods and goddesses and medicines and traditional outfits and, you know, songs and all of these things which don't necessarily seem important, but when you put them all together, essentially what they're being initiated into is their own culture, and they become a man of that culture, and that's a real badge of honor, and it connects them via shared experience to their elders. Because even if they wear shoes now, or they have different clothes, or they go into a job in the city, the rites of passage, the songs, the ceremonies, the outfits, whatever their culture includes, has been the same for potentially thousands of years. Ours isn't like that. Ours moves so fast that what our grandparents were doing has no bearing on our life whatsoever. We eat different food, we speak different language in many cases, we wear completely different clothes, we don't have the same jobs. So it's very difficult, and I think also we need to start bringing back that cosmology and trying to find one which fits for many more people as well, because our societies are so much bigger and multicultural, and so it's a big job. It's a really, really big, vast job, which is going to take a lot of people doing it. But I do think it will happen.
Yeah, because I think there's no kind of point in which, like in our lives, it's just my own life, where you're kind of like you end being a boy and you start being a man. You know, there's nothing you have to know how to do that ever signals to you that you come out of that phase.
Yeah. Whereas women do have that when they start bleeding.
Yeah.
That's something that connects all women worldwide, and that's the earth saying, okay, you're a woman now. And even if it's not dealt with in a particularly constructive way in our society, it's still something.
Yeah.
And again, the male bodily change is so slow, and it happens at completely different ages, and still it's like a taboo thing, like, to talk about, you know. So especially at school, you know. So it's like, and potentially traditionally that is why men got taken off to do something, because they needed that severance. They needed something, quite a harsh experience between adolescent and male, which again we just don't have. And there's so, like, even when we do the men's rite passages, which are nowhere near as extreme as a lot of the tribal ones, like, we have to sign so many fucking forms. It's like, it's missing. It's just, it feels like it's missing the point. It's difficult. Like some of the tribal initiations, you have to have your hands in wicker bullet ant infested gloves, or I was visiting this village in Senegal, the tribe called the Iwo tribe, and the 12 to 13-year-old boys have to run through the village all day from sunrise to sunset for a month in a straight line, doing a traditional dance and running. And then after that, for 3 to 4 months, they have to go into the bush together alone, and they can't come back unless it's on a full moon, and they can only come back at night to see their mother to get some water. And that's it. They can't get any food or anything, and then they have to go again. And many of them die.
Oh, wow.
So that and that is how important it was to these cultures that severance was made, because if not, then the whole culture could just fall apart. So they take it really seriously.
Well, I think this is like what you're talking into now is actually critically important for. Like, I know we're focusing a lot on men as well, but I do feel for individuals, like for all of us, in terms of Because think what you said about women, it's true, they have a physical experience, but then so do men, right? Because it's that first time that we realize that we can ejaculate and have that joyous experience. But that doesn't make us into a man. Like, you can very much be a boy and continue to do that. You can very much be a boy and continue to be a boy until you're in the 40s and 50s, and then in that respect of that mentality. And there's definitely, I'd say, from my own experience of myself and my personal work and what I continue to work on and what I see in the world around us, there's a lack of what we would say mature humans, like adult humans that have really begun to understand themselves and their emotions and the world around them, their impact and responsibility, I'd have to say as well, like our actual personal responsibility. So these ceremonies or rites of passage, as extreme as they were, they really set a defining moment between essentially where we get our energy. Like, do I get my energy from my mother, from my family, from the comfort of my village, or am I going to make it on my own and actually be able to make it on my own? Like one of my I suppose mentors or slash spiritual guide or something. Something she said is like her kids may not be perfect. She's like, my kids may not be perfect. Like, one of them drinks a lot, one of them smokes a lot, but she's like, one thing is that they know how to look after themselves. They don't come running to her with this and that problem, and they've been doing that for a long time. And she goes, that's missing in the world. Like, she even questioned the idea of inheritance, like the idea that you would inherit something from someone that came before you and created something. And because it could be very debilitating, or rather, there's a lot of people nowadays that's what they're doing. They're waiting to inherit off their family, and they haven't actually gone out and had the impetus, the drive to create for themselves or to do something with their own hands. And that is, funny enough, the human experience. It's actually very simple. The human experience is to live. You live and you go and you do what you need to do, and that is all part of the human experience. But so many of us just want to. It's like we just want to have what we see on the screens or have what we see other people have, and we completely lose sight of our own individuality, our own personal drive, our own creativity. What is our contribution to society, or even to our own lives? What's our contribution to our own existence and our own lives? Like, I saw an interesting thing in general, just about, we now live in a world where most people have very little survival skills. They wouldn't know how to even grow vegetables. But put me in there. At the moment, it seems like I've got a couple of plants, and it's touch and go. Where they sometimes got to get that, got to do CPR on the plant just to bring it back to life. But and it's we basically live in a world where so much of what we need to survive is now outsourced. We deliver our food, have it come to us, and all this stuff, and like people don't really necessarily know about healthy food or cooking for themselves. So there's so much about just being able to exist and be, and I feel it's actually inherently linked to our ability to really be ourselves and create as well. To actually be in touch with that nature of life and the simplicity of life, the simple things, and not just be where a lot of people seem to be is in a place of, like, it's kind of where we started this conversation, in a place of putting the responsibility somewhere else outside of it. Or it's difficult. I'm not having a go or blaming, because I know, like, one of the issues is that we tend to feel like I don't have the power. There's a lot of in society, but I don't have the power. And because I don't have the power, then naturally I'm going to have to expect someone else is going to do it for me. I'm going to have to wait. And if it doesn't happen, then that's just unfair, and that's just how things go for me. And then they live. I love what you said right at the beginning, but it's actually something which resonates with me deeply. It's about story and about stories and personal stories. In the last year or so, a couple of years, I've really gotten into storytelling and understanding and filmmaking and all this stuff, and really seeing how in every facet of life, everything is a story. Like, whether it's media marketing or you're promoting, the work that you do, it's a story. It's a certain tale that we're telling, and how we're all in a story, and we're all in our own individual stories, and they don't necessarily serve us And that's the thing, is like the story of me not having the power, for example, because I feel like, when I was young, my dad never let me go to the hairdresser to get a haircut. He had a go at me instead. So then from that moment, from being very young, like 4 years old, deciding, oh, okay, well, I'm not allowed to do what I want, so then fuck it, I don't have any power, and I will just be a lazy bum, and I'll expect everyone else to bring me what I need and give me what I need, because clearly I'm not allowed to do what I want for myself. And I meet so many people that nowadays, especially, and men especially, that this is a core issue, that they're very much trapped in that mode of creating, which is just a story about power and lack of it.
Yeah, there's a few things in that. Again, we are made of story, really. As humans, we think visually, and we use language, and the way that we see ourselves is generally through story. But I think we always like to think of ourselves as the main character in that story, all the time, and often the hero. And
yeah,
I'm studying with a guy called Martin Shaw at the moment, and he is an amazing storyteller. And he says at the end of the stories, "Where are you in the story?" And it's really interesting, because very rarely are people the main character, and if they are the main character, they're the main character in a very specific part of the story. So it's like, well, I'm them at the crossroads in the rain, and it's like there are so many different characters inside of ourselves, and they don't all get on. And I don't think they need to. That would be a really shit story, to be honest. And it is really interesting when you start to kind of, and that's one I really like myth, because getting into myth and that way of looking at it allowed me to really kind of stretch out the canvas of my life and be like, right, where am I here? And every day I'm in a different place, but it's all still me. And it allowed me to be a lot less judgmental with how I felt, because every part is so important to the main narrative. Where it's like, okay, whether I feel like the main character or I feel like just a tiny, a cloud in the sky in that moment of the story, seemingly insignificant, it all adds up to this, to me. And that what you were saying before, it really comes down to the question people ask is like, who am I? Who am I? Am I the person that my parents told me I needed to be? Or am I not that? Who do I want to be? What do I even want? And these seem quite simple questions, but they're very difficult to answer. And often there seems to be a bit of mourning involved in really coming to terms with that question, because you have to let certain things go. So it can be a difficult process, especially in our culture. It's strange, isn't it? Because it's so individualistic, but we all want to be the same person, in some ways.
Yeah.
So it's a strange one.
I think one of the hardest things, at least what I see for a lot of people, but one of the hardest things to let go is the idea that someone else is to blame.
Yeah.
That something happened, or that their parents said something, and now they're fucked up because of it, or now they think a certain way because of it, and they can't shake it. And I actually had this conversation with someone earlier today, and just because we were joking about how, the people that if you pay them a compliment, I could do like this sometimes. You pay someone a compliment, or you say their work's really good, and they're just like, oh, no, it's not. Like, there's this wrong, or there's that wrong. And so I sent my friend a meme to that sort of message, and she was like, yeah, I can resonate. And I was like, yeah, like Asian parents, like we're always told that we need to be doing better, but whatever that we've done is not good enough. So then we're always left feeling like, well, whatever I've done is not good enough. So I'm never expecting to be told that. But then eventually one day you realize like that was just something that your parents or someone said to you like some time ago. And now today I'm perpetuating that same judgment on myself. Like it's me doing it. It's not no one else. It's like no one's jumping into my thoughts now and telling me this. It's like it's just me telling myself that, oh, okay, this isn't good enough, or I'm not good enough, or something like that. And I find that for, let's say, someone who's a newcomer to self-awareness, personal responsibility is this unknown power, this personal power that all human beings have access to but don't recognize as a power, that if I'm responsible, then I can do something about it. But if I don't have responsibility, then I'm powerless, and I'm just a victim in the situation.
It's just a subject. It's just like a subject to the circumstance, it's almost could come full circle and go back to kind of, the current times we live in, Corona and whatnot, is like, that's where the power is in a lot of conspiracy theories, is because people can then go, this isn't anything to do with me. I have no power. I'm powerless. It's all these extremely powerful people that have the influence, or, in our personal stories, it's our, ultimately a lot of it's our parents, in some way they are to blame for how our life is not the way we would like it to be, or the way it should be. They didn't do something, they did too much of something, there's always, but it's when you come back and go, when you start to see more and more, you go, wait a minute, so you have personal power in your life. When you start to take personal responsibility for your current, how your reality is now and how you move forward, that's when you basically become all powerful in your life. You become the king of your own life. You become sovereign. It's like, I have the power in my life to shape how my life goes. Maybe there's going to be events that happen along the way that I don't like or don't go exactly as I plan or I want them to be, but I always have that personal responsibility in how I react and how I move forward beyond that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that, back to what you were saying, I'm about, projecting that kind of enemy, the villain character onto someone else. And I mean, that's okay, but what you're missing out on there is, by putting it somewhere else and not saying, okay, what could enable me, or what in me wants to be the villain? You're preventing yourself from understanding the potential steps that could happen to you, for you actually to become that. Jordan Peterson has a lecture about it, quite heavy hitting, where he asks one of his students, they're talking about Nazis, and they're saying, who in here would have been a Nazi if you grew up in Germany at that time? And obviously no one puts their hand up, and the lecture is essentially about being like, well, don't be so sure, because there's a million different things that could have happened, and not everyone that became a Nazi was evil. And it doesn't take away from the tragedy and the evilness and everything negative about it, but to understand the steps that may have happened where you could become evil, you will have a much better chance of preventing that, because you understand it. And if you look at your story, your life again, like a story, and you can put yourself in the position of the villain, you have much less chance in just falling into that trap if something happens, because you have a roadmap to it, and you're like, okay, well, I can see how I could get there, and that doesn't mean you are it.
Yeah.
You understand the process that could happen to twist someone enough where they become that, and it's good to know that, because you can keep yourself on the right road by knowing the rest of the roads.
What I hear in there as well, or at least for myself, what I hear in there as well, is actually recognizing the darkness that we all have. The potential for darkness that we all have inside of us, that exists, and whatever's in that particular part of our shadow, the side of us that, like you said, like wants to become the villain, or wants to entertain that side, that allure of having the power in that way. And I think that, and I know I was sharing this on a podcast David and I was on recently. I was just sharing about my experience in previous relationships where I saw that I could be a complete fucking dickhead. And that process...
Relationships are good like that.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, because it didn't come out anywhere else. There wasn't enough friction in my usual relationship. So I'm saving face, but in a romantic relationship where you're close and personal on a more frequent basis, eventually whatever's lurking underneath is going to come out, because it's just you're triggered, you're annoyed, you want your own space, whatever. Something's going to push it. But as bad as it was and as painful as it was to go through that experience for me at the time, I look back in it and we've mentioned this before, compassion. That gave me so much compassion because, like you said, like I can understand that actually I have it in me. Like it's not something that I'm saved from this. Like I'm somehow above it or righteous or whatever. I'm just fucking human. and so now when I speak to people and they talk about stuff, I'm just like, yeah, I can totally understand how I could be like that. So I get it, I can get how you could be a dickhead. I can be a dickhead too. And it's just it does create compassion, a huge amount of compassion for all people. It's actually surrendering to my own darkness allows me to be compassionate for everyone and what they're experiencing.
Yeah.
To some degree, at least.
I think it's what you're saying about Jordan Peterson and who would have been a Nazi. It's like it's to see that more and more. I think in my life now, I start to see how I can understand how people end up in whatever situation they're in, doing whatever actions they're in. I can understand it because I don't know the steps, but I have enough compassion and understanding that you can get to a certain point through a course of events that happen to you in your life. And it's like, when evil things happen, I'm like, I can see how someone come to the conclusion that was the thing that they should do. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can understand it. And it's through that understanding, there's also a compassion for the trauma that might have brought them to that place. Or the things that have occurred. And it also, like you said, it keeps you on your toes to not be so rigid in the kind of right and wrong of life. And you see that, easily we can all veer into evil, like we've all done some sort of act in our lives that we would deem to be evil. But if you always think, I can never be evil, then you'll always justify your actions of being right. Whereas if you are open to the idea that you could be guilty of evil things, you will equally be able to look at your compass and be like, oh, actually, wait, I'm moving away actually from what I see here. Let me come back, instead of rationalizing what you're doing as being okay.
Yeah. And you have the choice. You always have the choice. And if you prescribe to the idea that we are everyone and that we are everything, then there's a flip side to that, which is you're not just all the good things. You're all of the bad as well, and having a very solid sense of self can allow you to explore those things without feeling like you become them. And sometimes the mind wants to explore and throws up sorts of fucking crazy shit, but that's what the mind's job is, to do that. So yeah.
I feel like we've really we've just really gone through all sorts of topics there in this episode. I was just writing some of them down, like we really weaved a path through all sorts of topics. And it's interesting that we've come back to personal power, actually. And personal responsibility seems to be a big theme in what we've said here, about, not always feeling like the responsibility lies elsewhere. I think that's a really interesting kind of weaving that's gone through the whole episode.
Yeah. And ultimately, there's so much freedom in that. And by looking at your life as a story, and have a bit more compassion for yourself within that story and whoever you feel like, and the hero is not always the most important part of that story.
That's a really great point.
Actually, what do you mean by that?
I mean, why does the hero become the hero? I mean, the hero wouldn't be a hero without, everything else that happens within that story.
Okay.
If it didn't have an oppositional force,
Gotcha.
it wouldn't have a chance to become the hero. Often, the hero comes from an unlikely source and has to grow and become that. He often has help along the way. He's usually fighting for someone or something. So if you take any of those elements out, there's no chance to become the hero.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. There was a great Netflix series, I think, or maybe it was on Prime, which highlighted this really well. It's called The Boys, and it's all about the superheroes. And there's like a universe where there's like numerous people that have superhero capabilities, and then there's a bunch of them that are like they're the actual national superheroes, and they're actually privately contracted by this company to the government. And they help save the world, and there's this whole politics around it, right? But then what's interesting is they show you the dark side of what it is to be a hero, how they abuse their power, and they're taking the piss and stuff, and then what happens at the end of the season is, sorry, the spoiler anyone, but it's important to the point. What happens at the end of the season is the company that runs this superstar bunch of heroes, and they've got strong PR, make sure they always look good. They actually go and create the villain in order for them to have a reason to exist in society. Because every hero needs a villain, every villain needs a hero, and you can't not have that dynamic. One basically summons the other, and it actually reminds me what I was thinking very early on in Corona. Corona is the villain, and it's like then it calls upon there to be a savior. It calls upon there to be a hero. I actually put this on my Facebook thing. I said if Corona is the villain, then who is who is Neo? Like then who is Neo right now? And a bunch of people replied back, well, you are Neo, or not just me, but like themselves.
Bill Gates.
So, yeah. Well, he's definitely stepped up for it. He stepped up.
I'd say the hero would be the NHS.
Yeah,
that's one of them for sure. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
They were definitely in a story context. They were definitely made to be the hero early on, right? Like that's something I observed. But yeah, every villain needs a hero. Every hero needs a villain, and without I'm glad I asked you to clarify, because I think that puts it.
Yeah, and we're back to light and dark, and the self and the shadow, and the fact that it's all so necessary and to grow, and without those oppositional forces, really there is no story, or no need for one.
Yeah.
So it's a dance that we all must do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the age of Netflix now has really highlighted how life is basically Netflix.
Yeah.
It's like it's just one thing after the next, like, oh, okay, another bit of drama. And yeah, movies, he says to guys when we coach them, we'll be like, when you go to a movie, the protagonist goes through and he has this whole journey before he arrives at the end. I mean, normally he has some sort of breakthrough and it's all is well at the end. But you don't start the movie like at the end. You have to go through the journey. You have to go ups and downs, and then you reach the point of elation.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like otherwise it just wouldn't be interesting. You would just sit there and go, "Well, this is boring." Yeah, it's like superhero.
Terrible.
Movies. Yeah.
You're awful.
That's what heaven's for.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, this has been great. This has been really. I really enjoyed this. It's been insightful. It's been deep, but also I think I personally thought it's been very relatable and accessible in terms of what we're talking about here, and the emotion of things and how people feel and what people can do about how they feel. Self-awareness.
Yeah, it's been great. Like to talk about all these different topics and weave them together, and how they're also related to our own, like you say, story and the light and the dark. I think that's a really important part of that. It's like often there's this darkness and we just don't want it, but actually it's a necessary part of our lives, of the existence of all. To as you always said, is like without the light there is no dark. No, yes, exactly. You need the kind of duality of it to exist. for us. So yeah, but yeah, Eddie, it's been great. I'd just like to kind of find out, for our listeners, like how they can kind of get in contact with you and work with you and with your healings and your shamanic practices.
Yeah. So at the moment, because of the lockdown, everything is online, including the one-to-one sessions. I'm doing a weekly shamanic journeying workshop every Saturday night with a studio called She's Lost Control, which is open to everyone, men, women. That's 7 till 8 p.m. Instagram's probably the best way to find me, which is Eddy, Elsey, Elsey. And then my website is streetspirituality.com. Drop me a message. Yeah, thank you guys. It's been amazing to chat. And when this is all over, I look forward to seeing you.
Yeah.
Because you're not too far. You're just up the road from us.
Well, soon to be moving to Dudley.
That's true.
I'm going up to the Midlands.
New
Greener
adventure.
pastures. Yeah, greener pastures and new adventure.
But I'm sure I'll see you.
Cool.
All
right,
it's been
guys.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Ciao.
Well, that was a phenomenal episode. I love how we managed to cover so many different topics, and yet really covering some core themes around personal responsibility. And I think the biggest thing really is about actually acknowledging for ourselves, where in our life do we experience our own shame or guilt or things that we want to hide, and actually making a case for looking at these things, and by looking at these things that we become more at peace with ourselves and therefore more compassionate for other people, which is definitely a huge part of building wonderful relationships and meaningful relationships with people is by allowing people to be, and the best way to do that is by letting go of where you need to control yourself and start to just love yourself as well. So yeah, really what an amazing episode.
It was a great one. I really enjoyed, the energy that Eddy brings is very relaxing and calm. It kind of just slows everything down. Yeah, and the time really flew by as well. But I want to say a big thank you actually to all you listeners. You've listened this far in the episode, and also for all the sharing you do of our episodes. Like, we've seen a real kind of uptick in our listens in the last kind of couple of months. And yeah, I just want to say a big thank you to you, and continue sharing, whatever episode can help someone that a friend of a friend, whatever. Like, there's such an array in our backlog as well. Like, it's just great when we hear that people are getting huge value and it's making a big difference to their lives and their dating lives and their personal lives in general. So yeah, I just want to say a big thank you for that. And also, if you want to speak to us, obviously you can get in contact with us through Instagram. That's at Authentic Dating Series. That should be in the show notes. And also, if you want to email us, you can find us at hello@authenticdatingseries.com. If you're looking for any coaching around your dating life, being able to get personal power when it comes to your dating life, now is the perfect time. We've got other clients we're working with through these kind of isolation times, and we're seeing a huge kind of leap forward for them in terms of the ability to communicate, the ability to actually know what they want when it comes to dating life, and also their ability to attract the sort of women that they really desire.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, David, because I know some people are thinking like, now is not a good time because I'm not allowed to physically meet people. And actually, what we're finding is now is a great time because you got the time to focus on yourself and to really do this sort of work. And what we're also seeing with our clients is that they're actually making great connections during this time. So it's completely a false assumption that now is not a good time. In fact, I would say now is amongst the best times because there's a lot of people online looking for great conversations, looking to meet great guys. And we're all about developing you being your best self and putting that out there. So yeah, do get in touch. Like David said, there's our email, hello@authenticdatingseries.com is the best way if you want to talk about this. We're happy to jump on a call with you and discuss your dating challenges.
Cool. So yeah, that's it from us today, and you look forward to our next episode next week. Ciao.